Hello my friends, this is Lindy. Welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. And it's another Friday Reads. I've got 5 books to tell you about. 2 of them are audiobooks, 2 of them are for my Shadow Giller project, and 2 are about Algonquin people, so Indigenous subject content. That adds up to 6 books, but of course there's some overlap there. Anyway, before I get to the books, I'll tell you about what's been happening in the past week. Besides Folk Fest, I did make a separate video about the folk music festival, and I have some book recommendations connected with the music in that video. I'll link to it below in case you missed it. Some of you asked about the documentary that I was interviewed for that I mentioned last Friday. It's called Before Me Too, and it should come out next year. So a whole bunch of people are participating, interviewed in it, so I have no idea if my segment is even going to come up, but it should be interesting because it's about feminist media in Canada prior to the internet. And yeah, I will link to more information about the documentary below. And our house is kind of in a turmoil because we're getting ready for our house art show. My partner Lori is an artist, and we're having an annual show and sale next Saturday. So there's preparations for that. The paintings are being varnished and hanging wire and edged, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm getting ready for teaching a workshop on natural dyes in mid-September. And plus, Lori has got an art show that opens in Saskatchewan in the first week of September. So there's also preparations for that happening. Yeah, so I'll just pop in a few photos so you can see what life is like here. Maybe I'll put a little video at the end about the fabric preparation, because this natural dye workshop is just going to be one day, and there's a lot of prep work that needs to be done when you're working with natural dyes, and so I'm doing the prep work instead of it happening at the workshop, so we can just go right into the colors. I think it was Wednesday I spent 13 hours getting stuff ready, so that was quite the day. What else did I do? I made kimchi, and the trickiest part was finding room for it in the fridge once the fermentation was done. I don't think I have a picture of it. Oh, maybe I do. Just because with the sunlight, as it was on the counter fermenting, the colors of the cabbage and radish was just so beautiful. And I'm not sure what Joni is. What are you huffing about? Huh? What are you huffing about? You're all right. You're all right. What else? Well, it's Women in Translation Month. This is August. So if you want more information about prompts related to Women in Translation Month, and they are focusing on finding playfulness and joy, which I think is excellent. Anyway, I will link to Matthew's announcement video below, and also Kendra Winchester has done a vlog about Women in Translation Month, and I'll link that one down below as well. And my first book works for the prompt, read a book by an author you have read before. Here it is, Chandelier by Mieko Kawakami. and this is translated by David Boyd. And I read her Breast and Eggs, quite liked it, and I quite liked this short story as well. So it's just a little individual short story. When I finished it, I didn't quite know what to think, aside from, I kind of like this. It's about a woman who spends all day, every day, shopping. And so what's the story behind that? And her character is revealed through her actions, and her actions are surprising, let me put it that way, and unsettling. So a good story for making me think. This was put out by Europa Press, and it was a freebie at Independent Bookstore Day. So when I bought some books at my local bookshop, they said, "Do you want this?" I was like, "Sure." And that was back at the end of April, so I finally read it. Glad I got to it. And I can also say I'm participating in Women in Translation Month with it. Next up is an audiobook by Morgan Talty called Night of the Living Rez. It's a collection of interconnected short stories, and Morgan Talty is Penobscot, which is an Algonquin people. So these stories are set in contemporary Maine in the eastern U.S. And so they're all about a family, and told from the viewpoint of one of the family members named David. So some of the stories, David is a child, then into his teen years, and then adult, and later adult even. I think it might go up into he's about 30, I'm not sure. And I was surprised at how much I could relate to in these stories. Little things like driving a car with a radio that turns off and on as you go over bumps. I had a car like that. Times when there are so many caterpillars that they cover the roads and they're squashed and they're everywhere. And we have those periods in rural Alberta too, which is where I grew up. Tent caterpillars in our case. I'm not sure if it's the same kind of caterpillar in Maine. He talked about lying in bed with his girlfriend and following Ask Reddit threads on a laptop. I actually didn't know about that until one of the members of my feminist book club said, her suggestion was that for one of our discussions, we pick some of these Ask Reddit threads and discuss. That was a whole new thing for me, but by the time I read it in the short story, I knew about it. That was kind of cool too. So there are 12 stories. There's a lot of tragedy, addiction, poverty. Though I felt like I did gain a lot of insight into what life is like for this particular family. There is a passage about David going to a methadone clinic, and this woman, Tabitha, is ahead of him in line, and he says that she's an asshole. Everybody in the clinic knows because she's somebody who throws up her liquid methadone and then sells it. And I'm like, what? But that actually may or may not be true, according to someone else that David meets. Anyway, yeah, I quite liked this audiobook. It is read by Darrell Dennis. He's an excellent narrator. He's done lots of audiobooks. The other audiobook that I listen to is called Blueskin Gods by SJ Sindu. And the audiobook is read by Varun Sathi. Now, 2 hours into this audiobook, I was ready to bail. So I decided to look at reviews. And in Booklist, the reviewer mentioned that the first half of the book is slow, and then there's an explosive second half. And because this book is eligible for the Giller Prize in Canada, and I'm trying to read as many of those books as possible, I thought, well, I'll give this another chance. And I decided to speed up the audio. So instead of listening at my usual 1.25 playback speed, I sped it up to 1.75. And Varun Sathi has such a measured, clear voice in the audio narration that I had no problem following at 1.75 speed. And it does really help you get through an audiobook faster, and especially get through the slow parts, you know. Plus, I had to pick cherries in my garden, and then after I picked them, I made cherry jelly. And so I was doing something while I was listening to the audiobook, and the time just sped by. And yes, by the time you get into the second part, I was hooked in the story, and I was happy to be listening to it. Now, what is it about? It starts out in Tamil Nadu in southern India, and there's this boy who's born blue, he's got black blood, and he's raised in an ashram as an incarnation of Vishnu, the 10th incarnation of Vishnu. So Kalki has a very controlling father, and this whole family situation is actually quite interesting. And his aunt, uncle, and cousin, who's almost the same age, are at the same ashram for a while until there's a falling out and they go to the US. Then later on, when Kalki is in his, I think he's about 20, 22, something like that, he's on a world tour because people come to him for healing, and that's when he meets up with his cousin again. And his cousin has got a indie rock band that's called Blueskin Gods. I have to say, it's very, very interesting. The ideas are what really interested me in this. Ideas about faith and what we're told to believe and what we choose to believe. Yeah. The book actually made me pick up again this one that I started reading in July, Asura. It is it's kind of a retelling of the Ramayana, and it's from the viewpoint of Ravana. And because it was Tamil speakers in Blueskin Gods, and in Asura, Ravana is Tamil, I just thought, I remembered that, hey, I didn't get very far in this book yet. I had just been reading, a chapter here and there, and then, a week or two had gone by and I hadn't even picked it up at all. Not because it isn't interesting, but that actually the font is really tiny in here, and so I have to just read it when my eyes are best in the morning. Anyway, so I've made more progress on Asura as a result of Blueskin Gods. So that's good. And, I don't have the next book here. I have to go get it. I'll be right back. Okay. So, Daughters of the Deer by Danielle. So this is the other one that is eligible for the Canada's Giller Prize. And The Night of the Living Rez, Morgan Talty's book, so that one is set contemporary times. This one is also about an Algonquin people, the Wescarini, in Quebec. And it is set way back in the 1600s, the mid-1600s. It follows a mother and her daughter. Basically, the story follows a woman who is of the Wescarini people, and she marries a Frenchman, a soldier who then later becomes a farmer. And so they have mixed children. The author imagined this based on historical research about her own family, and her maternal ancestry is listed in the back. So the author is not Indigenous herself, but she does have this woman who is Indigenous, Wescarini, who is her ancestor. I had a personal interest in this story because my family history echoes Danielle's. So on my mother's side of the family, I have French-Canadian ancestry. Both of my grandparents, the Desaulniers side and the Charron side, originally came from France in the mid-1600s. There were no doubt Indigenous wives. Now, one of the things in this story that she talks about is a law that children of French settlers, the girls had to be married by 17, and if they weren't, documentation had to be filed telling the king why they weren't married, and there was also a fine to pay. So, this kind of law that is forcing white population is part of the sad history in Canada. And of course, the way that these particular women were treated, and you could see how their mixed children were treated, is also quite sobering, and I think authentic, realistically portrayed. I don't much care for the writing. It's not that I don't like historical fiction, but I found the writing a little bit pedestrian. There's a lot of reference to herbal medicine and which herbs in particular are used for what. And I felt like, okay, I'm interested in herbology, but I don't want that in my fiction. Kind of reminded me of, what's that called? The Children of the Earth series by Jean Auel, that starts with Clan of the Cave Bear. There's a little bit of that kind of feeling in it. And also there's one section that really took me out of the historical setting, and that was when Marie and her husband are walking, and he says, haven't we been happy? But Marie doesn't answer, just keeps walking as the deafening sound of crickets rings in Pierre's ears. jackets. Yeah. I'm glad I read it. A 3-star read for me. So I don't see it making it even to the long list of the Giller, but an interesting story, and I think she did a good job of imagining what life was like during that time period in the Trois-Rivières area of Quebec. So there's that. And last of all, my favorite book of the week, 5-star read, The Trees by Percival Everett. Oh my God, I love this so much. Very dark humor. Percival Everett is not kind to the rednecks of Mississippi. His 2 black detectives who are investigating a strange series of murders are hilarious. Deadpan hilarious. I laughed so much as I was reading this. And what have I got to share with you? So the crime scenes were quite gruesome. This one is outdoors. "What's that in his hand?" the sheriff called to one of his men. "Sheriff? That would be testicles," the man said. "What?" "Testicles. And I suspect that they belong to him." He pointed to the dead man in prison clothes. "I say that because that guy is missing his." So that's enough to give you an idea about what these crime scenes are like. There's always a white man or a white person, or more than one, and one black man, and the black man keeps disappearing. What is going on? There's all these colorful expressions like, "Your pappy didn't have sense enough to pour piss out of a boot with the directions wrote on the heel." "Jesus H. Christ on a crutch in a cornfield." And a lot of what the hell is going on. So entertaining, with strong social message. Puppy wants me. Anyway, that's it for my Friday reads. Thank you so much for watching.